文彦哥，你的行李我给你拿回来了。啊，这里危险，你赶快跑！哎呀，没事儿，我比他们危险多了。住手！
In case you're wondering, yes, all fencers know how to do that.
是什么功夫？怎么一瞬间把他们都解决了？击剑。
I'm not gonna touch too heavily on this because this isn't really fencing. It's street fighting. That's pretty much all it is. But the whole trope of a fencer knowing what to do in a street fight, even if they have a stick with them, it's entertaining, I'll grant you that, but it's not entirely realistic. The thing is, over the years, as fencing has evolved into a sport rather than a martial art now, fencing has lost most of its technical weapon handling skills and has further refined and entrenched its understanding of other aspects that were present in duels that could still be replicated safely in a sporting bout. They're not really transferable to, on the street kind of stuff. I would say the only thing that a fencer might have going for them is the fact that they wouldn't really flinch or hesitate when trying to hit someone or, more importantly, getting hit. If they get hit, then, that's entirely possible, especially since they're most likely not going up against other trained fencers. And the thing is, if someone doesn't really know how to fight, that actually gives them an advantage because they don't do what they're supposed to do. So they don't really have technique, but in one or two fights, that can work in their favor because it's unpredictable. So I wouldn't bet any money on the fencer actually winning, but there might be one or two things, like I said, not flinching and not hesitating, maybe doing a feint or something, making one attack look realistic enough for their opponent to fall for it and then doing something else. Maybe some of that would work, but I don't think much else would really help them, and in fact might even be a disadvantage. If you're a fencer and you get into a fight on the street, the only thing that I would recommend is to run away. And if you've been doing fencing for long enough, you should be good at that. Your legs should be nice and strong, and that should be the only way to approach it, is to literally not approach it, turn around, run away, call someone.
这场闹剧终于结束了，你要去哪儿啊？这我妹的头盔，凑合用一下啊。等会儿，哎呀，留个电话呗，改天请你吃个饭。不要说不啊，我不喜欢欠人情。行，关键不是从命。哇！哇！哎，你比我想象当中好像还要矮一点。
是你长高啦。二豪，
无声。
好久不见。你们休息一下吧。啊，来，姐，擦。二豪，喝能量饮料。二豪，刚刚我的那个进攻动作是不是很有问题啊？你要不帮我指导一下？
刚刚你那个刺的动作缺乏了一点速度，再来一遍。对，刺过去。对，再来一遍。
So there wasn't a whole lot of fencing there, but there are a few things I would like to bring up. The first thing is something that they got right. It was kind of a small detail, but I like that it was there. It was the fact that even though they were fencing dry, they had electric masks. You can see here everything that they're wearing is all white, meaning they don't have any lames, no electrical equipment, nothing like that. But this mask here, the one that they're using, is all silver, which means it's all conductive, which means it's meant to be hooked up to an electric strip. There are masks that are designed to not be conductive. They are pretty much just found in epee. But the thing is, most saber fencers, in fact I think pretty much almost all of them, don't have a non-conductive mask and then a conductive mask, one for dry fencing and one for electric fencing. The thing is, that's really just a waste of money, and the inside of the mask is not conductive. It has padding and everything, so most of the sweat doesn't really get to the outside of it, especially since most of the time in dry fencing you're not really going all out. I'm not sure if that's what they were doing here or not. It was difficult to tell. So the fact that they were using all dry equipment but had an electric mask that wasn't plugged in is actually very accurate. The only part of their fencing that I can critique, because there wasn't really a whole lot, were her practice lunges. There was one thing about it that I didn't like. It was the fact that her guard, as you can see right here, is pointed off at a 45-degree angle when she is in on guard. This is a nice attention to detail. The thing is, referees and even your own fencing opponent look for not just what it is you are doing, but what it is that you mean to do. The way that this can help a ref is by looking at the knuckle guard. If the knuckle guard is pointing off to the side, then that is a good indicator that your defensive action is being made on purpose instead of just waving your blade around. If your knuckle guard is pointing forward, then that means that you are meaning to do an offensive action, again, instead of just waving your blade around. The on-guard position is meant to be a very neutral position between these two forms, whether offensive or defensive. So it's a good habit to have your knuckle guard at a 45-degree angle so that you can more easily shift between offense or defense, depending on whatever it is that you need to do at the time. So it helps convey your intention, and to a certain extent, at least with some of the parries, having the proper knuckle guard placement can help keep the blade from whipping around and coming in and getting you. Something that's called a remise. So it's something that a lot of studios kind of miss. I've seen this mistake all over, but I'm not really seeing it here. It's a nice little attention to detail. Of what I saw, though, there are two things I would like to point out. First of all is her feet whenever she's lunging. Her front foot isn't really landing that far out, so she's not really kicking enough. A good kick is important for a lunge. It not only means that it's easier to move forward in the short span of a lunge, but it also means that you can land it at the proper placement, because if it's too far, then you're stretching your legs and it's very difficult and you might lose your balance. If it's too close, then your attack landed early and you also, again, might lose balance. Also, if you land too early, then you usually have momentum that is pushing you forward, and that creates an unnecessary strain on some of your leg muscles. So having the proper placement is very important, and having a good kick is the easiest way to do that. So she's landing it a little early, but that can be forgiven, because that's the kind of thing that, unless you have been doing fencing your entire life, it's the kind of thing that when you're, in the zone, when you're getting into it, when you're, in a tournament and there are strings attached and you do not want to lose and maybe you're a bit tired, that's the kind of mistake that is very easy to make, is having the wrong foot placement. However, the other thing that she was doing wrong is with her back foot. She's keeping her toe on the ground but lifting her heel. This is bad form. It doesn't really affect the lunge too much. What it would affect is it makes recovering more difficult, which is very important in fencing. If you lunge and you mess up, or your opponent backs up out of the way or parries you, or basically in one way or another your attack did not work, you need to immediately recover, or even before you recover, begin to retreat. This is most easily done if your back foot is staying entirely on the ground. If your heel is up and your toe is there, so your back foot is kind of at a weird angle, that can make it difficult, and if you're going fast enough, it can even make it dangerous. It can lead to injury. So that's the kind of thing that I think a fencing instructor would point out right away, because they do not want it to be a bad habit. There are bad habits that can lead to losses, and there are bad habits that can lead to injuries. And this bad habit can lead to an injury. The other main thing was how she's cutting. The thing is, how she's cutting is, it wouldn't be too bad for foil or epee, but it would still be a problem. Because foil and epee, they're thrusts. What she's doing is a cut, but she's sort of putting too much into it and moving it in the wrong way. The thing is, when you cut, there are a few things that happen. It can be divided up into stages. First is the knuckle guard comes forward, and at the same time, the tip drops, but not all the way, only to about here. Then, the cut. You do it by extending your arm and sort of relieving some of the tension in your hand, because as you finish your extension, you will then snap your hand close, resulting in a couple more inches of cutting power, which is very quick and rather light. What this does is it makes your attack more efficient. There is less wasted movement, it is faster and easier to control. More importantly, there is less actual arm movement. So, first of all, this helps by having basically the momentum of the blade staying where it should be. So basically, instead of attacking, trying to hit with the middle of the blade, you are actively trying to hit with the very tip of the blade, thereby increasing your range and your point control. And it makes it easier to do different cuts while not making them look too different. So a chest cut would look pretty much the same as a head cut, or an arm cut would look pretty much the same, or an arm cut to the bottom would look pretty much the same as a flank cut. So it makes them all very similar, which means they are harder to parry and easier to fool your opponent into thinking you're going one way, and then once they commit, go into another. But this can only be done with a good cut. What she's doing is she is beginning her extension while keeping her arm up, and then sort of sweeping it down as she's finishing. This is a very common mistake that you don't want to keep doing. It's something that almost all beginner saber fencers go through, but it's also something that their coaches will spend a good amount of time fixing. So she's supposed to have been fencing for a long time, but she has a couple of beginner mistakes here. But let's keep going.
我明天就回学校，继续读书，继续升学，我要爬得比所有人都高。哎，这体育学院不是可以招体育特长生吗？振宇学院怎么样啊？振宇学院可是击剑的最好的学校，而且那个校长赵振宇还得过世锦赛的击剑冠军。不过拳击好像没有吧？我决定了，我要去学击剑。 我要加入振宇学院击剑队，我要改变我的人生。
It's not that easy. God. Way to friggin' insult the sport like that. Oh, I'll just get into the top-rated academy. Dude, even if I went now with my 10 to 11 years of experience, I would get slaughtered if I tried to go to Notre Dame or something like that. I'm just gonna keep going.